Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Our mission, it's pretty straightforward. You provide the source material, and we really dig into it.
Yeah, we pull out the essential knowledge, maybe some surprising facts, things that might actually shift how you look at the world.
Exactly. Think of it like getting up to speed fast without feeling like you're drowning in information.
And we're sort of your guides through it all, helping you grab the core ideas from the material you've given us and, crucially, understand why they actually matter.
Okay, so today we're tackling something that's just, fundamental to almost any organized human effort.
How organizations are put together, their structures.
Right, and why that structure isn't just, a chart on an HR website, but something that really shapes how people collaborate. We've got this document, and it gives a fantastic overview of organizational theory.
It really does. Starts way back historically and brings us right up to some, frankly, quite modern cutting-edge models.
So our mission for this deep dive, we're going to walk you through these different ways organizations set themselves up.
We'll look at the logic behind them, the pros and cons, because there are always trade-offs, right?
Always. And figure out when each approach really makes sense. So by the end, you should have a solid framework for analyzing any organization you come across.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's get into it then. Organizations are, they're literally everywhere, aren't they?
Absolutely. Ancient armies, building empires.
Right through to the tech startup down the road or the huge multinational you buy stuff from every day.
Exactly. And how they're put together, that structure, it's not just academic theory. It is the architecture for how people work together.
It dictates how effective they are, how people feel working there.
And ultimately, whether they succeed or fail. So yeah, let's dive into this history and these different models.
What's really interesting, I think, is just how old this idea is.
Yeah, the source material points it out. Humans have been organizing for common goals for literally millennia.
It mentions the Greek and Roman armies.
And the Phoenician trade networks. Highly structured operations, even back then.
It makes total sense, doesn't it? The second you have more than one person trying to achieve something,
you immediately run into those structural questions. Who's leading? Who does what task?
It's all about trying to get that synergy, right? That idea that working together achieves more than individuals could alone.
Precisely. And maybe one person or a tiny team can get by without much formal structure.
Sure, very informally.
But as soon as you start adding more people, maybe more than just a few, those questions about roles, who specializes in what, how things get coordinated, they become really critical.
How do you stop people tripping over each other or duplicating work?
Yeah, how do you make sure everyone's pulling in the same direction effectively?
And the scale of all this just exploded during the Industrial Revolution, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That whole period forced a much more systematic way of thinking about managing large groups of people.
The document brings up Adam Smith's famous pin factory example.
Right, where making a simple pin was broken down into something like 18 distinct steps.
That's division of labor taken to, an extreme. It really shows the power of breaking tasks down and specializing.
But also the complexity it introduces, which leads us neatly into the first structure type, the material covers, the entrepreneurial structure.
Okay, so this is the most basic form. You see it all the time in really small businesses.
Yeah, sole traders, little partnerships, brand new companies. The document calls it simple, informal, very fluid.
Almost changing day to day, maybe, depending on what needs doing right then.
Pretty much. It's really driven by the owner or the founders. They make most of the key decisions.
And employees often juggle multiple roles, less focus on rigid job descriptions.
Exactly. There might be some specialization, but it's usually pretty adaptable.
Like the person doing the books might jump on customer calls if needed.
The big strength there is obviously that flexibility, that direct control. It's great for small, fast-moving situations. Decisions can be made instantly.
No layers of bureaucracy to wade through.
But, and here's the catch, as the business grows, that same informality can start to cause problems. It can become chaotic.
The founder becomes a bottleneck. Everyone needs their approval.
That's often what happens. Things start getting missed. That flexibility flips into being a liability because roles aren't clear.
And that's the point where you absolutely have to introduce more formality.
Which, historically, especially during the Industrial Revolution, often pushed organizations towards the next model. Probably the most common one we see.
The functional structure.
Yes, the classic pyramid hierarchy most people picture when they think of an organization chart.
Senior management at the top, clear reporting lines flowing down vertically.
through different departments, which are grouped based on their function.
So you get your marketing department, your finance department, production, HR, IT, all those typical ones.
Each one is a functional silo, you could say, with managers overseeing the specific activities within that function.
And the document points out some significant advantages here.
Definitely. You bring specialists together so you leverage their expertise. You should get economies of scale within each function.
And everyone knows their role, who they report to. Clear lines of authority, accountability.
Yeah, it's really good for preventing duplication of effort within a function.
But, and this is the big but the source highlights.
Rigidity and those dreaded silos.
Right. When you group people only by function, they can become, well, blinkered, reluctant to work across departments.
They might not even understand what other parts of the business do. Coordination between those functional towers gets really tough.
And slow, especially as the organization gets bigger.
Information tends to just flow up and down its own functional ladder, creating bottlenecks higher up.
It can also make the whole organization quite inward-looking, can't it? Focused on internal stuff rather than reacting quickly to the outside world.
Yeah, responding to customers or market changes can be sluggish.
Now, within this functional model, the document mentions variations managers use to try and tweak it or cope with size, like being tall or flat.
Right. A tall structure has lots of management layers, a long chain of command from top to bottom.
Whereas a flat one deliberately cuts out layers, pushes decisions further down.
And related to that is span of control, how many people report directly to one manager.
Which isn't a magic number, is it? It depends on how complex the work is, how experienced people are.
How similar the tasks are. And technology's made a big difference there too, allowing for wider spans of control now.
Yes, definitely.
The source also talks about centralization versus decentralization within this structure.
So centralized means decisions are kept right at the top.
Concentrated authority. Decentralized pushes that authority down, empowers lower levels to make more decisions.
Which sounds like an attempt to combat the slowness of a tall, rigid, functional structure.
Often, yes. Giving more autonomy closer to the action.
And this basic functional model can also be adapted quite significantly depending on what the company actually produces or where it operates.
For sure. Like if a company has a really diverse range of products, completely different things.
They might organize by product line, not just function.
Exactly. So instead of one giant marketing department, maybe product A has its own marketing team, sales team, maybe even its own production line.
And product B has the same, all reporting up to a general manager for that specific product.
Yeah, the document uses the example of different types of detergent needing totally different approaches or brand identities. Makes sense when things are that distinct.
And a similar adaptation happens geographically, right? For companies operating in lots of different places.
Absolutely. They'll often set up separate functional structures within each key region or country.
Which is vital if local markets or laws or even customer tastes are really different.
The source contrasts needing separate setups for, say, the UK and Germany, versus perhaps grouping Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands if their markets are more alike.
So it's driven by the market realities, not just drawing lines on a map.
Precisely. It has to be.
Okay, so we've gone from the simple entrepreneurial setup through the very common functional structure with its various tweaks and adaptations like product or geography.
Right.
The next structure the document gets into is the matrix structure. And this one feels like it's specifically trying to fix the problems of the pure functional model.
It really is. It first popped up, apparently, in the U.S. aerospace industry back in the 50s.
Makes sense. Complex projects, tight deadlines.
Exactly. And the core idea is you overlay a project-based structure on top of the traditional functional hierarchy.
So wait, an employee in, say, the finance department still reports to the head of finance.
Yes, their functional boss.
But they also report to a project manager for a specific project they're working on. Two bosses.
Essentially, yes. Dual reporting lines. That's the defining feature.
Okay.
This lets project managers officially pull in the people they need, the expertise, from across all the different functional departments for however long the project lasts.
So it's about sharing skilled people more effectively across silos.
The document has a nice line about professional firms, where your manager might actually change depending on which project you're on that day. Highlights the fluidity.
The main benefits seem pretty clear then. Flexibility, better resource sharing. You can pull together teams with the exact skills needed for a specific job.
Communication, in theory, could be faster too because project managers cut across those functional divides.
And it should hopefully reduce some of that departmental red tape, at least for project work.
And for the employees themselves, the source suggests it can be good, like job enrichment, getting exposure to different kinds of work.
Opportunities to develop new skills by working on varied projects.
Yeah, and it naturally forces more interaction between departments, which helps break down those functional walls we talked about.
So it sounds like it could potentially make an organization much more adaptable, more responsive to change.
That's definitely listed as a potential plus. However, and this is a big however, the downsides are significant.
I was waiting for that.
It's often why matrix structures are tricky to get right. The biggest issue is it violates that basic principle of having one clear manager.
Right, the dual reporting thing.
Employees can get conflicting instructions. Functional manager wants one thing, project manager wants another. Who takes priority? How do you square different styles or demands?
Yeah, that potential for conflict, for confusion, seems massive.
It really can be. The document also flags things like increased time pressure on employees juggling multiple demands, and even potentially slower decision-making if the roles and responsibilities within the matrix aren't super clearly defined and managed. It takes a lot of good communication and negotiation skills from everyone.
Okay, so moving beyond these more, let's say, traditional structures, whether hierarchical or dual reporting like the matrix, the source talks about something called boundaryless organizations, which sounds very modern, like dissolving walls.
That's exactly the idea. For, centuries, organizations were mostly defined by having people physically together in one place within formal internal structures.
But technology, especially IT, has just completely changed where, when, and how people can actually work together.
Right. And that's led to new ways of setting up relationships, both inside the traditional company walls and also outside them.
The first boundaryless type mentioned is the virtual organization.
Yeah, this is one that operates mainly, sometimes even completely, through electronic means, using IT to get rid of the need for everyone to be in the same physical office.
So people work remotely, maybe with hardly any company buildings at all.
Could be. Communication is all email, video calls, shared platforms, maybe extranets connecting with partners.
And it can go beyond just internal teams, right? It can change how you deal with suppliers, customers, maybe no need for physical shops or call centers. The document mentions Amazon as an early pioneer here.
Yeah, it can be a pure form, maybe a service company with just a mailing address, or it could be partial, like a big company where lots of people work from home, but there's still a main headquarters.
The upsides seem pretty obvious, particularly cost savings, less rent, utilities, office support.
Definitely. And e-business processes themselves can bring efficiencies through automation.
Plus, for employees, losing the commute, having flexibility, that makes jobs more appealing.
Especially for people with families, or maybe long or expensive commutes.
And there's often that sort of modern image that appeals to certain customers too.
True. But the downsides are also pretty serious. You are heavily, maybe dangerously, reliant on technology.
If the IT goes down.
Or connectivity fails. Or worse, you have a security breach. The whole operation can just stop dead.
And it naturally excludes people who aren't comfortable with tech or don't have reliable access.
That's a key point. And culturally, in some places, there might still be a strong preference for face-to-face business, making it harder for purely virtual models everywhere.
And for the employees, that lack of regular, informal human contact.
Yeah, that can lead to feeling isolated. You potentially lose some of that team spirit and motivation that comes from just being around colleagues, those water cooler moments.
Okay, next in the boundaryless group is the hollow organization.
Right. This one takes the idea of sticking to what you're good at to an extreme. It's about outsourcing almost everything that isn't your absolute core competence.
So the company figures out what it really needs to keep in-house its unique advantage, and then contracts out pretty much everything else.
Exactly. Manufacturing, logistics, IT support, maybe even parts of HR or finance. They operate with a relatively small core team, but get scale and specialist skills by relying heavily on external partners.
Nike's the classic example given, isn't it? They keep control of design and marketing, but almost all the shoe production is outsourced.
It means you have to be incredibly good at building and managing those crucial relationships with your outside partners.
Building on that idea is the modular organization.
Yes, it's kind of like a more advanced version of the hollow structure, especially for really complex products. Think cars or airplanes.
It breaks the whole thing down into major chunks or modules.
And each big module is outsourced to a different specialist supplier who's responsible for designing and building just that piece.
The Boeing Dreamliner example is perfect here. Different huge sections of the plane made by different companies all over the world.
And then it all comes together for final assembly.
The source sees this as highly efficient because it pushes responsibility and cost onto those suppliers.
Right. They have to compete and innovate within their specific module. It avoids the old model where, say, a car company owned all its component factories.
Okay, and the last one in this boundaryless section, the shared services organization.
This one's a bit different because it's more about internal restructuring.
Ah, okay.
You take support functions that are needed across many different parts of a big company, things like IT help desks, basic HR admin, maybe accounts payable.
And instead of each division having its own little team for those things,
you consolidate them into one central dedicated internal unit, a shared services center that serves the entire organization.
So one big HR admin center, one big IT support hub.
Exactly. The goal is to cut down on duplication, get internal economies of scale, save costs, and make sure policies and processes are standard across the whole business.
Services are often delivered through internal hotlines or web portals, that sort of thing. The example was a big consultancy centralizing its professional training.
Yeah. It's popular, but the source does caution it's not right for everyone.
Especially if different business units have really different or specialized needs that a central service might struggle with.
Mm-hmm. And while you might save money, maybe don't overestimate it because you might still need some local support on the ground.
Right.
And that, I think, covers the main structures discussed in the source material we looked at.
Yeah, it does. So we've covered quite a bit of ground from that very simple founder-led entrepreneurial model through the functional structure that's so common with all its variations: tall, flat, span of control, centralization, product or geographic focus.
Then the matrix, trying to overlay projects onto functions.
And finally, these newer boundaryless forms driven by tech and outsourcing: virtual, hollow, modular, and shared services.
And the really critical takeaway, which the document stresses repeatedly, is that there's no single best structure.
No magic bullet.
No. Each one is a tool, basically. It has its strengths, it has its weaknesses. Choosing the right one completely depends on the organization's specific situation.
Its size, what it's trying to do, the market it's in, its goals.
Exactly. You have to match the structure to the strategy and the context.
Absolutely. And understanding these different models, it gives you a really useful lens, doesn't it? A framework for looking at all the companies and organizations you deal with.
Whether you work for one, buy from one.
Or maybe you're even thinking of starting your own. It helps you kind of peek behind the scenes.
See the why behind how teams are set up, how decisions tend to flow.
Yeah, it moves you beyond just, the company logo to understanding a bit about the engine inside.
Well put.
Okay, so here's something to maybe mull over, a final thought as you go about your day and encounter different organizations. Think about how incredibly fast technology is changing everything: work, business, communication.
It's relentless.
So which of these structures we've talked about do you think is actually best suited to handle constant change, unpredictable markets, the need for really rapid innovation?
That's a great question.
And maybe even, what might the next big evolution in how we structure organizations look like? If these are today's models, what's coming down the track?
Food for thought, definitely.
Something to think about as you observe the world of work around you.